Hello everyone, I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today we will explore a new survival journey with Trieu Dung as he wakes up early and heads deep into the forest to check the simple trap he set the night before. What he discovers in the quiet morning mist is completely unexpected. A wild boar has been caught, giving him a chance to bring home fresh food and improve his daily meal. Will this difficult journey through the forest end safely? Let's find out together. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next adventure. Before the sun had fully risen above the mountain ridge, Trieu Dung was already awake inside his small wooden house. The forest outside was wrapped in pale morning mist, and the air carried the damp smell of leaves, soil, and cold ashes from last night's fire. He moved quietly because the first calm hours of the day were precious. Morning was the best time to enter the forest, when the ground still held the tracks of the night. He washed his face with cool water, tied an old cloth around his head, and checked the things he needed. A knife hung safely at his waist. A small woven sack and a bamboo carrying frame rested near the doorway. He did not bring much, only what was necessary. Life in the forest had taught him that heavy things slow a person down, but careless preparation can cost much more. The evening before, Trieu Dung had gone into the lower part of the forest and set a simple trap along a narrow animal path. For several days, he had noticed disturbed soil, broken roots, and muddy prints near thick bushes. Wild animals often passed that way after dark to search for food. He hoped the trap might help him catch something, not for fun, but to improve his daily meals and save his strength for the hard work ahead. Food was never something he took lightly. Every bowl of rice, every handful of vegetables, every piece of meat had to come from effort. Some days he could gather bamboo shoots, wild bananas, or forest greens. Other days he had only simple soup and salt. That was why he needed to check the trap early. If something had been caught, he had to reach it before the forest became too hot. He stepped out of the house and closed the wooden door behind him. The yard was still quiet. A few chickens scratched near the corner of the fence, and thin smoke drifted from the cooking area. Trieu Dung paused for a moment, looking toward the dark green line of the forest. Then he lifted the bamboo frame onto his back and began walking. The path from his house to the forest was uneven and damp. Dew clung to the tall grass, soaking the bottoms of his trousers as he moved forward. The first stretch passed along a small slope, then down toward a stream where stones were covered with moss. He crossed carefully, placing each foot where the rock looked firm. The water was shallow, but one wrong step could send him slipping. As he entered deeper into the forest, the sounds changed. The village noises faded behind him, replaced by insects, birds, and the soft cracking of branches under his feet. He kept his eyes on the ground, searching for signs. Some leaves had been turned over. There were fresh marks in the mud. His face grew more focused. The forest was telling him something. After a long walk, he slowed near the place where he had set the trap. The bushes ahead were shaking slightly, even though there was almost no wind. Trieu Dung stopped at once. He lowered the bamboo frame from his shoulder and listened. A rough breathing sound came from the other side of the shrubs. Then he heard a heavy movement, followed by the dull thud of hooves against the earth. His eyes sharpened. He knew then that the trap had worked. Moving carefully, he pushed aside a branch and looked into the small clearing. There, caught in the trap from the night before, was a wild boar. It was not a giant one, but it was strong, dark, and muddy from struggling. Its breath steamed faintly in the cool morning air. Trieu Dung stood still, studying the situation with caution. A wild boar, even when trapped, could be dangerous. He did not rush. He circled slowly, keeping a safe distance and watching every movement. The simple trap had held well, and the animal was already exhausted from fighting through the night. This catch meant warm food, strength for the coming days, and a reward after many quiet efforts that no one had seen. Trieu Dung took a deep breath and looked around the small clearing before making his next move. The forest was quiet, but he knew he could not stay there for too long. The longer the sun climbed, the more difficult the way back would become. The ground would grow warmer, insects would gather, and carrying a heavy load through the path would take more strength. He pulled a length of rope from his woven sack and prepared himself carefully. His movements were calm, steady, and practiced. He did not treat the catch like a victory to show off. For him, it was part of survival, part of the quiet responsibility of living away from comfort. In the forest, everything had value, and nothing should be wasted. After making sure the wild boar no longer hurt itself or him, Trieu Dung secured it firmly to the bamboo carrying frame. The animal was heavier than it looked, and when he tried to lift the frame, his shoulders tightened under the weight. He bent his knees, adjusted the straps, and slowly stood upright. For a moment, he remained still, breathing through the pressure in his back. The journey home was not easy. Every few steps, he had to watch the ground beneath him. The path was narrow, covered with wet leaves and tangled roots. Branches brushed against his face, and muddy grass slapped against his legs. His hands gripped the shoulder straps tightly as he moved down the slope. Once, his foot slid on moss, and he had to catch himself against a tree trunk. He stopped, breathed, and continued again. Even though the load was heavy, there was quiet satisfaction in his eyes. This catch would change the meal for the day. Instead of plain rice and vegetables, he would have fresh meat to cook over the fire. It would give him energy, and it would remind him that effort in the forest often returns something, even if it takes patience. When he reached the stream, he placed the bamboo frame down beside a flat stone and rested. Cold water ran over the rocks, clear and fast. Trieu Dung washed the mud from his hands and splashed water on his face. Morning sunlight cut through the leaves above him, shining in golden lines across the stream. He looked tired, but his expression was peaceful. After a short rest, he lifted the frame again and continued toward home. Smoke from his yard slowly appeared through the trees before the house came into view. The chickens scattered when he stepped into the yard, and the wooden door stood as he had left it in the early morning. He lowered the heavy load near the outdoor cooking area and stretched his aching shoulders. The first thing he did was prepare the fire. He gathered dry sticks, split a few small pieces of wood, and built the flame under a simple stove made from stones and packed earth. Soon, smoke rose steadily into the open air. He brought water, cleaned the cooking tools, and prepared everything with care. He cut some fresh herbs near the fence and picked a few wild vegetables he had gathered earlier. The smell of smoke mixed with the sharp scent of leaves and the rich smell of meat as the food began to cook. Trieu Dung stirred the pot slowly, adding salt and a few crushed spices. The simple kitchen became warmer, and the sound of bubbling soup filled the quiet yard. By midday, the meal was ready. He sat beside the wooden table with a bowl of hot rice and a portion of wild boar cooked with forest herbs. The food was simple, but to him it felt valuable. It was the result of waking before sunrise, walking through wet forest paths, checking the trap with caution, and carrying the catch back home with his own strength. Trieu Dung ate slowly, not in a hurry. The warm meal gave him comfort after the long morning. Around him, the forest remained wide and silent, but the small yard felt safe and alive. One successful trap had not made his life easy, but it had made this day better. At dawn, Trieu Dung wakes inside his small wooden house and prepares to enter the forest. The night before, he set a simple trap along an animal path, hoping to catch something to improve his daily meals. Walking through wet grass, slippery stones, and quiet morning mist, he follows the signs left on the ground. When he reaches the trap, he discovers a wild boar caught in the bushes. Knowing the animal can still be dangerous, he moves calmly and carefully, securing it before carrying it home on a bamboo frame. The journey back is heavy and exhausting, but the catch gives him hope. At home, he prepares the fire, cleans the food, adds forest herbs, and cooks a warm meal. After a difficult morning, Trieu Dung finally enjoys the reward of his patience and hard work.